For this project, I'm going to be talking about special education, race, and technology. The first article that I read for the project is Telling It Like It Is. So historically, racism and classism have played a significant role inside the classroom. The article stressed that not all students that were diagnosed with learning disabilities were given the same opportunities. So they found that Black students spent more time in self-contained classrooms than white students. The white students got more opportunities to be educated in the general education classroom, and white students diagnosed with learning disabilities were also privileged in the types of services they got because students of color or of a lower socioeconomic status that had the same diagnosis did not get the same access to those services. So the main point of that was that students of color were having different experiences compared to their white peers, and this affected them in the long term with decreased graduation rates, increased dropout rates, and just an overall negative post-school experience. So current curriculums right now are not including anything about what has been going on in the past, and I think that this experience of different races getting different treatments in the classroom can be applied to a lot of different classrooms and schools across the country. So right now there's a big push towards equality and fair opportunities for everyone, but a lot of it is just talk. Like the article said, this push needs to include more than just putting different colored students or students of different abilities in the same classroom. A big part of it is including diverse topics in the curriculum, like telling people how the past has not treated everyone fairly. And so this way everyone can get educated on these subjects that really matter. So every student needs to be better included in their learning in classrooms. Current curriculums aren't including essential lessons such as the roles that racism and classism have on education and society. So like kind of what I just said before. So before coming to college, I'd never taken any classes or experienced any lessons or anything that talked explicitly about issues like this. Schools are becoming increasingly more diverse, and the curriculums in schools should reflect that by educating all students about the role that their histories play in the classroom. So instead of taking out these problems from teaching and from the curriculums, it's important to put them directly into the curriculum so we can learn from them and improve for the future. This article can be related to my future as a speech path because knowing about the history of the treatment of different groups in the past can help me learn how to do better in the future. So it'll be important for me to take into account cultural differences or backgrounds or different abilities when working with different people. So I'm not going to give someone better treatment over the other because of the color of their skin or my own biases like that. Blanchett also talked about the history between special education and different races in her article. She explained the theory that learning disabilities were developed to protect white children from school failure, which I thought was pretty interesting. And another thing that I took away from the article was that learning disabilities are seen as somewhat of a privileged disability. So society tends to be more accepting of those that look like us. So those diagnosed with learning disabilities are seen as not being so different because they look the same on the outside, I guess. So in contrast, those with developmental or intellectual disabilities are seen as more different and then they get treated as such. So those with learning disabilities are also privileged in the services made available to them in school, so they get more access and spend more time in the general education classroom compared to students with developmental or intellectual disabilities who get the majority of their education in a separate classroom. A point that I thought was interesting was that these privileges only seem to apply to the white middle class or higher class, so students of color and lower status don't get the same privileges. The article talked about how white students were more likely to be educated in the general classroom for most of the day, while Black students with the same disabilities were educated in self-contained classrooms for the majority of the day, so they weren't getting the interactions with their general education peers. The article also talked about how it's important to normalize students with all types of disabilities and to respect everybody. So it's normal, as I said in the last slide, that it's normal in our society to see people with developmental delays as someone different from others, but that's just not the case. It's important to value and accept everyone as they are and not feel the need to fix someone or treat them differently. So this idea of treating all people with respect is important in just being a good person, but also important in the speech language pathology field, because in my future I'm going to be seeing clients of all different abilities. So it's going to be really important to treat all of the kids and or adults equally. So everyone, those labeled with learning or other disabilities, or those that come from different socioeconomic backgrounds or from diverse racial and linguistic backgrounds, I'm going to have to respect all of them and try to learn more about them and treat them the same as I would anybody else. So I want to learn more about them in order to give them the best experience and treatment that I can. The next article that I read was Grounded in What Works. In this one, the authors kind of explained how teachers can best use the technology acceptance model and TPACK in special education. So the first thing is the technology acceptance model, and this tries to explain computer usage behavior. It looks at how technology users accept and then use that technology. So the article talked a lot about how teachers view the reliability, use, and ease of technology impacts how much they'll actually use that technology in their classrooms. I think this is a really good point because nobody's going to use something that they don't really understand or that they're confused by. So teachers need to be able to test the technology and find it beneficial before they can actually apply it in their classroom. Another important addition that the article made was that it's also important to look at it from the student's perspective. So teachers need to take into account if the technology they want to use in the classroom is actually going to be useful for the student. A study done in the article found that the teachers found value in using technology only if it made learning easier and more meaningful for the student. So while the teacher's perception of usefulness and ease is important in deciding if the technology can be implemented in the classroom, the student's perception is equally or even more important. Students are the ones actually trying to learn from the technology, and they're the ones actually using it. So how they feel about it is what matters the most. Technology selection and integration needs to provide individualized instruction to meet student needs rather than to meet teacher preferences. So this means that if a piece of technology makes the teacher uncomfortable, if it's beneficial for the student, they'll need to try to learn and adapt to do what's best for the student. The next thing that the article talked about was TPACK, which helps explain how to teach with technology. So the teacher's knowledge of content, pedagogy, and technology is needed to effectively integrate technology into the classroom. Content is needed because it's important to know what exactly you're going to be teaching, and pedagogy is how the teacher goes about teaching the content, and then technology is used as an overall support to the two. So the teacher needs to understand how their students best learn and then reflect on that to see what technologies can help them. The main point that I got was that the teacher's main focus should be on what's best for the student, and then they can use all the components of TPACK to express that to the student. Teachers should take risks and try new technologies in new ways that they might not be familiar with because that might end up being the best for the student. So to do this, they should be educated about the different things that are out there and also the individual needs of their students so they can be able to make the right decisions to combine the two. Technology is a super useful tool that can make students' experiences better. Because it can be manipulated so much, teachers can learn how to use it to fit the needs of their diverse classrooms and all the individual students. Another thing that I took away from the article is that technology opens up many more opportunities and methods that students can learn from. It really changes the way that students learn. Students learn in the classroom in all different ways. So for a lot of students, learning needs to be hands-on and visual, and technology supports this by giving students a way to actively engage in their learning. Technology allows them to manipulate and maneuver through the content they're studying, so it's more about getting knowledge rather than just memorizing facts or getting lectured at. A good point that the article made is that a lot of students in the special education classroom specifically are more visual, so technology can cater to this by showing those students lessons in ways that teachers could not do by themselves. I can utilize this in the future by using technology to cater to different learning styles. So if my clients like to be more visual, then I can show them some videos, or if they learn better by being hands-on, I can implement different online activities or games that allow them to go through the content themselves. To effectively integrate technology into the classroom, teachers need to be willing to explore and adopt new technologies. So, when trying to select the most appropriate technology for their classroom, teachers need to begin with the students and put their needs first. The article said that they can do this by observing the student, questioning what they need, seeing what engages their interests, and then thinking about what technology can be used to help that student meet their learning goals. And I think that these are all good ideas in getting the students' goals implemented right away so they have time to work on them and improve. Understanding the limitations of technology in relation to students is another good point that the article made. So some technologies simply might not work for students because of the motor skills necessary to use them. So teachers also have to take that into account and be knowledgeable about that as well. When picking what technology to use in the classroom, the most important thing to focus on is what the student needs and their abilities, not what the teacher thinks is easy or popular at the time. As the article pointed out a bunch of times, it's important to put the student first, and the needs and abilities of the student should be what guides the process of selecting and implementing a certain technology. So I can apply this idea to my future as a speech language pathologist because I'll need to focus on what my particular client needs because every single one is going to be so different. So, for example, I could get to know my patients and learn more about their interests and hobbies, and then I could implement a specific technology that would pique those interests, and then that would get them more excited to want to learn more during therapy. So, speech paths also need to be educated on how to select and implement certain technologies to match the needs of different patients and clients. Knowing the technology that's out there and being able to pick out which one would best fit the needs of who you're trying to help is an essential part of the job. Another important component is giving teachers the permission to take risks and be flexible. Teachers should be able to try out new things that they think will be beneficial to their students and not be limited by what like what the curriculum says they have to do. So I can relate this to my future as a speech path because I want to be able to try and test out new technologies to know what they can do before I give them to my client. I don't want to just be fixed on one list of things and then have to pick from that. I want to be able to explore more and pick what would work best for that particular client because I want to make sure that they'll actually benefit from it. So technology is becoming an increasingly more important part of our lives. So education is definitely needed to help teachers better integrate technology to help their students. So technology can be especially helpful in supporting special education students, but guidance on how to do this is super essential as well. So this relates to my future as a speech path also because I'm going to have to learn how to use specific technologies to benefit my clients. So finally, I'm going to talk about what I gained from both articles together. Both of the articles stress the importance that education has on the future. The first article highlighted that the traditional education system in America has been known to favor the white, middle, and upper classes. So knowing how the past has treated different classes differently by giving those with the same diagnosis different opportunities based solely on the group that they're in gives current students a way to learn how to do better in their own practices. So when things are done wrong in the past, we can use that to improve. So we're using past mistakes and successes to grow. Without recognizing how things worked in the past, it's impossible to be able to build a plan that can better include everyone in the future. So this importance of education can also be applied to the second article because it focuses on how education programs need to be geared towards educating teachers on how to utilize technology in the best way. The second article also mentioned that future coursework should include the review of success stories, so this is another way to use the history as a framework for the future. Looking at how different techniques have been successful in the past can also help prepare us for work in the future because it has shown us like some kind of proof that a certain thing or concept has worked. So even though each situation is different, it's good to be able to look at the past and try to apply those successes to what we're currently working on. It just gives us a better base to build our own practice on. The second article talked more about education in the sense of being knowledgeable about the different technologies that are out there and then being able to apply them in the correct time for a certain individual. So you're using what's worked in the past to help your future clients. And then putting students first. So the first article reinforced that not just one type of student can be put above others. It's super important to consider the needs of all students and then understand how you can help them. So even though these readings were more focused on special education and teachers, the same topics can be used in the speech path field that I want to go into. Diversity and inclusivity are two major topics that can always be improved on, especially from how they have been dealt with in the past. So these are important subjects that are not going away. Teaching explicitly about the role that race and class has on access to different services is super important. All people should have the same right and accessibility to bettering themselves. One type of person shouldn't have an advantage over the other. So from the second article, I learned more about how important it is for teachers to take into account how students will be able to use technology and not just let their own personal views cloud it. Technology is going to continue to expand and get more advanced, but unless professionals know when the best time to use it is, it's kind of useless. This can be applied to my future career as a speech path as well, because technologies like AAC or different apps and programs and stuff like that, they're used all the time to help those with speech or language disorders. And so I'm going to need to be familiar with the different technologies that exist and be able to choose which ones to use for specific clients and their needs.